Draven stood on the bridge of the Iron Fang and watched his planet breakers fire again, and again, and again. Each blast shook the fabric of space around Earth. Each blast carried enough destruction to end a world. And each blast splashed harmlessly against the golden shield, like water against stone. His officers were silent. No one dared to speak. They had never seen anything like this. In the entire history of the Valori Empire, no species had ever built a defense that could withstand even a single planet breaker. Draven had 12 of them firing at full power. The shield did not care. "Increase output to maximum," Draven said. His voice was calm, but his hands were gripping the railing so hard that his gray knuckles had turned white. "Sir, we are already at maximum. The weapons are overheating. If we continue, we risk structural damage to the planet breakers themselves." "Then let them burn," Draven shouted. The calm was gone now. Something wild and desperate had taken its place. "I will not be stopped by a dead species and a wall of light." But the shield held. It held as if it had been designed specifically to humiliate everything the Valori had ever built. And in a way, it had. 47 of Draven's warships were trapped inside the barrier, drifting helplessly above Earth's surface. Their weapons were useless against the shield from the inside. Their engines could not push through it. They were flies in a jar, and they knew it. Draven was about to issue another order, when his scanning officer spoke in a voice that had gone very quiet and very small. "Commander, I am detecting fold space disturbances." "Where?" "Everywhere, sir. The first human fleet dropped out of fold space behind the Valori formation. 200 ships from the Andromeda Drift, led by Commander Soman. They appeared without warning, without announcement, without mercy. Their ships were unlike anything the Valori had ever seen. Sleek and dark, with no wasted space, no decoration, no symbols of pride or conquest. They were tools, built for a single purpose. Before the Valori rear guard could even turn to face them, Soman's fleet opened fire. Precision strikes hit the engines and weapons of the nearest Valori cruisers, disabling them in seconds without destroying them. It was surgical. It was clean. It was the work of a species that had spent 500,000 years studying its enemy. Draven spun around. "Return fire! All ships engage the—" He stopped. Another fold space disturbance. This time, above the formation. 300 warships from the Neptune Veil materialized in perfect formation, blocking any escape toward open space. At their head was the flagship of Admiral Dohan, a man whose family had commanded the Neptune Veil fleet for over 10,000 generations. He was old for a human, with gray hair and steady hands and eyes that had seen more star maps than most Valori officers had seen meals. Dohan's fleet did not fire immediately. Instead, his ships simply took position, forming a net above the Valori armada. The message was clear. You are not leaving. Then came more. From the Orion Shadow, a fleet of stealth cruisers appeared on the left flank. From the Cygnus Reach, heavy destroyers emerged on the right. From the Sagittarius Deep, from the Perseus Arm, from places the Valori did not even know existed, human ships poured out of fold space like a river breaking through a dam. Thousands of them. Draven watched the tactical display as red dots, his ships, were slowly surrounded by a sea of blue. The blue kept growing, and growing, and growing. "How many ships?" he whispered. His officer's voice cracked when he answered. "Over 4,000 confirmed, sir. And more are still arriving. 4,000 warships, built in secret over 500 millennia by a species the galaxy had forgotten. A species the Valori had dismissed as dead. A species that had looked at the stars, seen the darkness coming, and decided to prepare for it in a way no other civilization had ever imagined." Draven gripped the railing. The bridge was completely silent, except for the steady beeping of incoming signals. Every human ship was broadcasting on the same frequency. They were not attacking. They were waiting. They were giving him a chance to surrender. In the command chamber beneath Earth's surface, Ha-Jun watched the fleets gather on his screens. The sight was overwhelming. He had known intellectually that the colonies were out there. He had known the numbers. But seeing thousands of human ships appearing out of the darkness after 500,000 years of silence, was something else entirely. It was like watching the dead come back to life. Yuna stood beside him, her eyes moving across the tactical display. She was already calculating, planning, adjusting. But even she had paused for a moment when the first fleets appeared. Even she had felt the weight of what was happening. "Open a channel," Ha-Jun said. "All frequencies. I want every ship in this system to hear this." Yuna configured the communication array. It took only a few seconds. The technology was old, but it was human technology, and human technology was built to last. "Channel open," she said. Ha-Jun took a breath. He thought about the world above him, the forests and oceans and mountains, the animals that had lived in peace for 500,000 years, the cities that had crumbled and been swallowed by green. He thought about the billions of humans who had lived and died in the hidden colonies, generation after generation, never seeing the sun of their homeworld, never walking on real grass, never breathing open air. They had sacrificed everything for this moment, every single one of them. He was not going to waste it. "This is Ha-Jun," he said. His voice carried across every frequency in the system, reaching every Valori ship, every human vessel, every hidden listening post in the sector. "Guardian of Earth, last of the first watch." He paused. The silence was absolute. "To the Valori Empire, you came to our world because you believed we were dead. You came because you believed there was nothing here that could stop you. For 500,000 years, you have conquered and enslaved and destroyed without consequence. You have boasted about your power in halls built on the bones of the innocent. You have measured your worth in the suffering of others." Draven listened. Every officer on every Valori ship listened. They could not look away from their screens. They could not stop the cold fear that was creeping up their spines. "You were wrong about us," Ha-Jun continued. "We did not die. We did not run. We chose to disappear because we knew what was coming. We knew that one day a species like yours would rise and try to swallow the galaxy whole. And we knew that when that day came, someone would have to be ready." On the bridge of the Iron Fang, Draven's hand moved slowly toward the weapons console. His fingers hovered over the controls. One button, one order. He could still fight. He could still. "You boasted about conquest," Ha-Jun said. "Now learn why the galaxy once feared Earth." The human fleets moved, not all at once, but in a coordinated wave that showed training and discipline that the Valori could barely comprehend. Somin's ships closed in from behind. Dohan's fleet pressed down from above. The stealth cruisers from Orion's shadow appeared inside the Valori formation itself, having slipped through undetected. Every Valori ship found itself with at least 3 human weapons locked onto its hull. And still, the humans did not fire. Yuna opened a private channel to the Valori flagship. Her voice was quieter than Ha-Jun's, but somehow more frightening. "Commander Draven," she said. "This is Guardian Yuna. I know you can hear me. You have 60 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender your fleet. If you do, no one dies today. Your soldiers will be returned to Valori space unharmed. Your empire will be given a chance to change." She paused. "If you do not surrender, we will disable every ship in your fleet within 4 minutes. We have had 500,000 years to study your technology. We know every weakness in every system you have. This is not a threat. It is a fact." Draven stared at the tactical display. 4,000 human ships surrounded his 300. His planet breakers were overheated and useless. His trapped ships inside the shield were dead weight. His weapons could not scratch the barrier around Earth, and the human fleet had not even shown its full capability yet. They were holding back. They were being merciful. And that, more than anything else, terrified him. Draven had built his entire life on the belief that power was the only thing that mattered, that strength was the only language the universe understood. And now he was standing face to face with a species that had more power than he could imagine, and they were offering him peace. He did not understand it. He could not understand it. It broke every rule he had ever lived by. His hand hovered over the weapons console. His officers watched him. The entire fleet watched him. The entire galaxy, it seemed, was holding its breath. Draven closed his eyes. When he opened them, he slowly pulled his hand away from the console. He straightened his back. He looked into the view screen, where the blue and green planet of Earth glowed behind its golden shield, surrounded by thousands of ships crewed by the descendants of a species that had chosen to wait 500,000 years instead of fight. "Power down weapons," he said quietly. "All ships." No one moved. "I said power down," he roared, and this time they obeyed. Across the system, Valori weapons went silent. Shields dropped. Engines cooled. The great invasion fleet of the most powerful empire in the galaxy surrendered to a species it had believed was extinct. In the chamber below Earth, Hajun let out a long breath. Yuna closed her eyes and leaned against the console. The monitors showed Valori ships powering down one by one, like stars going dark. It was over. But it was also just beginning. In the weeks that followed, human ships would spread across the galaxy. They would reach the conquered worlds. They would break the chains. They would open the Senate doors and let the enslaved species speak for the first time in centuries. It would not be quick. It would not be easy. There would be resistance and complications and setbacks. But humanity had waited 500,000 years. They were very good at patience. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Dohan looked out at Earth and allowed himself a rare smile. Beside him, Commander Saman stood with her arms crossed, watching the Valori ships drift helplessly in the void. "Do you think they understand?" Saman asked. "What just happened to them?" Dohan shook his head slowly. "Not yet, but they will." Below them, on a planet that had been forgotten by the galaxy and remembered by its children, the golden shield still burned. It would stay active for years, a beacon visible from 1,000 light-years away. A reminder, a warning, a promise. Earth was awake, and it would never sleep again. The Valori invasion fleet was the largest force ever assembled in a single operation. 300 warships, 50 heavy cruisers, 12 planet breakers, massive vessels designed to crack a world open like an egg. At the center of the formation was Draven's flagship, the Iron Fang, a ship so large it had its own gravity field. Draven stood on the bridge of the Iron Fang, watching the stars stretch and blur as the fleet moved through fold space. He was dressed in full battle armor, not because he expected to fight personally, but because he liked the way it made him look. Conquering a dead planet did not require armor, but it required the appearance of power, and Draven understood appearances better than anyone. His officers had questioned the size of the fleet. 300 ships to take an empty world seemed wasteful, even by Valori standards. But Draven had not built his career by being careful. When Draven arrived somewhere, he wanted every living thing within 10 star systems to feel his presence. The fleet dropped out of fold space at the edge of the Sol system. The yellow star hung in the distance, ordinary and unremarkable. 8 planets circled it in slow, predictable orbits. And there, third from the star, was Earth. Draven looked at it through the view screen, blue and green and white. He remembered it from his visit years ago. Still beautiful, Still quiet. Still useless. Scan the planet, he ordered. His scanning officer ran the instruments over Earth's surface. The readings came back almost immediately. Sir, there is significant energy activity beneath the surface. Much more than our previous records show. The readings are unusual. Define unusual. The energy signatures do not match any known technology in our database. They are structured, but we cannot determine their purpose. And sir, the activity is increasing. Whatever is down there knows we are here. Draven felt a flicker of something he had not felt in a very long time. Not fear. Draven did not feel fear. But something close to it. Curiosity, perhaps. Or the instinct of a predator, sensing that its prey might not be as helpless as it seemed. He crushed the feeling immediately. Begin descent, he said. All ships to attack formation. Planet breakers to standby positions. If anything on that planet so much as looks at us wrong, I want it reduced to dust. The fleet moved forward. 300 warships arranged themselves in a sphere around Earth, cutting off every possible escape route. The planet breakers took their positions at cardinal points, their massive weapons slowly charging, with enough firepower to shatter a continent. Deep beneath the surface, Hadjun and Yuna watched the fleet arrive on their monitors. The chamber around them had transformed in the 48 hours since they had woken up. Systems that had been dormant for millennia were now fully active. Lights blazed along corridors that stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. The underground complex was alive again, humming with purpose. Yuna counted the ships on the screen. Her expression did not change, but Hajun noticed the slight tightening of her jaw. 300 warships, she said. 12 planet breakers. They brought everything. They are afraid, Hajun said. They just do not know it yet. Yuna turned to him. The shield is ready? Fully charged. 500,000 years of stored solar energy. One activation will sustain the barrier for decades. And the signal? This was the part that mattered most. The signal was a quantum-encrypted broadcast designed to reach every hidden human colony across the galaxy simultaneously. It was the call to come home, the call to fight. Once it was sent, there was no taking it back. Humanity would reveal itself after 500,000 years of silence. Every colony, every hidden fleet, every sleeping ship would receive the message and know that the time for hiding was over. Yuna had spent the last 2 days reviewing the colony data. The numbers were staggering. Over the centuries, the hidden colonies had not just survived, they had thrived. Populations had grown, technology had advanced, and the ships they had built were not primitive relics. They were weapons of a civilization that had spent 500,000 years preparing for exactly this moment. The signal is ready, Yuna said, but I want to wait. Hajun looked at her. Let them get close, she explained. Let them commit their entire fleet to Earth. Let them think they have already won. Then we activate the shield and send the signal at the same time. They will be trapped between an unbreakable barrier and an incoming fleet with nowhere to run. This was why Yuna had been chosen. Not for her strength, but for her mind. She thought in layers. She planned in centuries. Agreed, he said. Above the surface, Draven's fleet began its descent into Earth's atmosphere. The first wave of warships broke through the clouds and spread out across the sky. They cast enormous shadows over the forests and oceans below. Animals scattered, birds exploded from trees in massive flocks. The world that had been peaceful for 500,000 years trembled under the weight of the Valori Armada. Draven watched from orbit, satisfied. This was what he loved, the moment of total dominance, the moment when a world realized it belonged to him. Ground teams ready, his officer reported. We can begin landing operations. Do it, Draven said. The first troop transports detached from the warships and began descending toward the surface. They headed for the spot where the energy readings were strongest, a region covered in dense forest, with mountains rising in the background. and a wide river cutting through the valley below. They were 200 meters from the ground when the world turned white. Hajun pressed his hand against the activation panel, and the shield ignited. It did not come up slowly. It did not flicker or struggle. It erupted from the surface of the earth like a second sun, a wall of pure energy that expanded outward in every direction at the speed of light. It passed through the atmosphere, through the descending transports, through the warships in low orbit, and kept going until it formed a perfect sphere around the entire planet. The Valori transports were thrown back like leaves in a hurricane. Ships tumbled through the air, their systems overloaded by the energy pulse. 3 warships in low orbit lost power completely and began falling toward the surface, only to bounce off the inner wall of the shield like stones thrown against glass. On the bridge of the Iron Fang, alarms screamed. Every screen flashed red. Draven gripped the railing in front of him as the ship shook violently. "What is happening?" he roared. "A planetary shield, sir. It appeared instantaneously around the entire planet. Our ships inside the barrier are trapped. Weapons fire is having no effect. The energy levels are beyond anything in our records." Draven stared at the view screen. Earth was now encased in a sphere of golden light. It was beautiful and terrible. He could see his own ships bouncing helplessly against the inside of the barrier, unable to break through. "Destroy it," he ordered. "All planet breakers fire." The 12 planet breakers unleashed their weapons simultaneously. Beams of concentrated destruction struck the shield from every angle. Each beam carried enough power to crack a planet to its core. Together, they could have destroyed a small star. The shield did not even flicker. Draven felt the blood drain from his face. At the same moment, deep underground, Yuna activated the signal. It was a simple message, broadcast across the galaxy on a frequency that only human technology could detect. It traveled through fold space, through the dark gaps between stars, through the silent places where humanity had hidden for 500 millennia. It reached dead moons and hollow asteroids and rogue planets drifting in the endless night. The message was short, just 5 words. Earth remembers. Come home now. In the darkness of a frozen moon orbiting a gas giant in the Kepler region, lights turned on. Engines that had been cold for centuries began to warm. Hangar doors that had not opened since before the Valori Empire existed groaned and slid apart, revealing row after row of warships. On an asteroid hidden in the dust cloud of a dying star, a woman named Salmon received the signal. She was the commander of the Andromeda Drift Colony, one of the largest hidden settlements in the galaxy. She had trained her entire life for this moment. Her parents had trained for it, and their parents before them. Every generation had passed down the same promise. One day, the signal would come, and they would answer. Salmon stood in the command center of her colony and watched as her fleet powered up. 200 ships, fast, heavily armed, and built for one purpose. She opened a channel to her pilots. "You know what this means," she said. "Move out." Across the galaxy, the same scene played out again and again. Colony after colony received the signal. Fleet after fleet launched into the dark. From the Neptune Vale, Admiral Dahuan led a formation of 300 warships out of hiding. From the Orion Shadow, a fleet of stealth cruisers slipped into fold space without a sound. Humanity was coming home, and the Valori had no idea what was about to hit them. The first thing Hajun felt was cold. It was a deep, ancient cold that had settled into his bones over centuries. His fingers twitched, his chest expanded. His lungs burned as they filled with air for the first time in 500,000 years. Every muscle in his body screamed, as if it had forgotten what it meant to be alive. He opened his eyes. The light was soft and blue, coming from panels in the ceiling of a chamber made of dark metal. Everything was exactly as he remembered it. The rows of monitors, the curved walls, the hum of machines that had been running without rest since before the Valori Empire was even a dream in the mind of some forgotten warlord. A voice spoke to him. It was the voice of the system, calm and patient, the same voice that had guided him into stasis all those years ago. Guardian Hajun. Awakening sequence complete. All biological functions restored. Current date: Galactic Standard Year 502,417. You have been in stasis for approximately 500,012 years. Hajun sat up slowly. His body ached in ways he did not know were possible. He looked at his hands. They were the same hands, young, strong. The stasis had preserved him perfectly, down to the last cell. But the weight of the years pressed on his mind like a mountain. "Why was I woken?" he asked. His voice was rough, dry, barely a whisper. An external scan was detected in orbit. Origin identified as Valori Empire. Scout-class vessel, single occupant. The scan penetrated to a depth of 200 kilometers and triggered automatic defense protocols. Hajun closed his eyes. The Valori. He had been briefed about them before going into stasis. A young, aggressive species. Conquerors. The kind of civilization that measured its worth in the number of worlds it had crushed. "Is the second Guardian still in stasis?" he asked. "Yes. Guardian Yuna remains in Phase 0 stasis. Shall I initiate her awakening?" Hajun thought for a moment. If the threat was just a single scout, there was no need to wake Yuna. But something in his gut told him this was not going to stay small. Things never stayed small when the Valori were involved. "Wake her," he said. He climbed out of his pod and stood on the cold metal floor. His legs were weak, but they held him. He walked slowly to the main control console and placed his hand on the surface. The console recognized him instantly. Screens lit up all around the chamber, showing data that had been collected over the centuries by the automatic monitoring systems. What he saw made his heart sink. The galaxy had changed. The Valori Empire had spread across almost every sector. Hundreds of species had been conquered, enslaved, or destroyed. The old alliances that humanity had known were gone. The Morath were extinct. The Cellin had been absorbed. Civilization after civilization had fallen like dominoes. And Earth had been forgotten. Completely and totally erased from galactic memory. The plan had worked. Humanity had wanted to disappear, and they had succeeded. But the cost of that disappearance was now clear. With no one to resist them, the Valori had devoured everything. Behind him, the second stasis pod hissed as it began to open. Stasis fluid drained away, and a woman gasped as she took her first breath. Hajun turned and watched as Yuna sat up, coughing and shivering. She was smaller than him, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that had not dulled even after 500,000 years of sleep. Yuna had been chosen as the second Guardian, not because she was a warrior, but because she was a strategist. While Hajun was the shield, Yuna was the mind. "How long?" she asked, before anything else. 500,000 years, give or take. Then she looked around the chamber, at the glowing screens and humming machines, and her expression hardened. "What woke us?" Valori scout, in orbit. His scan triggered the defense system. Yuna swung her legs out of the pod and stood up. She was unsteady for a moment, then found her balance. She walked to the console beside Hajun and began reading the data. Her eyes moved fast, absorbing information at a speed that would have impressed even the most advanced Valori analyst. "They have grown," she said quietly. "Much more than we predicted." "Yes. And the colonies?" This was the question that mattered most. When humanity had decided to vanish, they had not simply gone to sleep. They had scattered. Thousands of small colonies had been hidden across the galaxy, on dead moons, Inside asteroid belts, in the frozen clouds of gas giants, in the empty spaces between stars, where no one ever looked. Each colony was self-sustaining, equipped with the technology to survive indefinitely in complete silence. They were humanity's insurance policy. If Earth ever needed them, a signal would call them home. Ha-Jun pulled up the colony network on the main display. Green dots appeared across the map of the galaxy. Hundreds of them. Some were clustered together in dark regions, far from any trade routes. Others were isolated, single points of light in the vast emptiness of space. They are still there, Ha-Jun said, and for the first time since waking up, he felt something like hope. All of them, silent, waiting, just like us. Yuna nodded slowly. How many ships? Ha-Jun checked the numbers. The colonies had been building quietly, carefully. Generation after generation, they had been constructing fleets in the darkness. Ships designed not for exploration or trade, but for war. Humanity had known, even 500,000 years ago, that one day they would have to fight again. Thousands, Ha-Jun said. Maybe more. The data is old, but the production schedules were designed to continue automatically. Yuna turned away from the console and looked up at the ceiling, as if she could see through the 300 kilometers of rock and metal above them, through the forests and oceans and clouds, all the way to the stars. And the shield? She asked. Ha-Jun brought up the shield network on a separate screen. It was the crown jewel of human engineering, a planetary defense system powered by the sun itself, channeling solar energy through a network of nodes buried deep beneath Earth's surface. When activated, it could generate a barrier around the entire planet that no known weapon could penetrate. It had been built in the final years before humanity's disappearance, the last and greatest achievement of a species that had always been at its best when its back was against the wall. Fully charged, Ha-Jun said. 500,000 years of solar energy stored and ready. Yuna allowed herself a small smile. Then we have everything we need. Above them, in orbit, Talek stared at his scanner in disbelief. The energy readings from below the surface had suddenly spiked. The slow, steady heartbeat he had detected before was now faster, stronger, more complex. New energy signatures were appearing all over the planet, as if a giant machine was stretching after a long sleep. He tried to run a deeper scan, but his instruments were blocked. Something beneath the surface was actively interfering with his equipment. For the first time in his career, Talek felt real fear. He opened a communication channel back to Valori Command. His hands were shaking as he typed out a message. He kept it short. Priority alert. Sol system, Planet 3. Something is waking up. Recommend immediate investigation. Do not, repeat, do not send a military force. This is not a threat we can handle with weapons. The message traveled through fold space and arrived at Valori Command Headquarters within the hour. It was flagged, categorized, and forwarded through the standard chain of command. Eventually, it landed on the desk of Commander Draven. Draven read the message once. Then, he deleted it. He opened his own communication channel and issued a single order. Prepare the invasion fleet. Target, Sol system, Planet 3. We leave in 48 hours. In the chamber below Earth's surface, Yuna looked at Ha-Jun. The monitors had detected the communication burst from Talek's ship. They could not read the content, but the direction it was sent told them everything they needed to know. They are coming, Yuna said. Ha-Jun nodded. He placed both hands on the console and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was no fear in them, only a calm, steady determination that had survived 500,000 years of sleep. Good, he said. Let them come. Talek could not sleep. The words from the ancient archive burned inside his mind like a fire he could not put out. We are not gone. We are waiting. He had read thousands of old records from dead civilizations before. Most of them were final messages, goodbyes, warnings, cries for help that no one ever answered. But this was different. This was not a goodbye. It was a promise. He spent the next several days quietly pulling together every piece of information about Earth he could find. He worked in secret, using his personal terminal during off hours so no one would notice. The Valori military did not encourage curiosity. Soldiers who asked too many questions often found themselves transferred to mining colonies on frozen moons where nothing lived and nothing grew. What Talik found was strange and incomplete, like a puzzle with most of the pieces missing. The humans had been a young species. They had only reached space travel a few thousand years before they disappeared from the galactic record. By Valori standards, they were barely infants. And yet the few records that mentioned them always carried a strange tone. Not fear exactly, something closer to caution. As if the older species who had watched humanity grow were not sure what they were looking at. One ancient report from a long-dead species called the Morath described humans as dangerously adaptive. Another, from the Selen Collective, noted that humans had a strange habit of surviving things that should have killed them. Wars, plagues, environmental collapse. They kept coming back. They kept rebuilding. They kept getting stronger. And then, roughly 500,000 years ago, they simply vanished. No war had destroyed them. No plague had wiped them out. Their planet showed no signs of a catastrophic event, as if they had packed up everything they were and walked into the dark. The Valori at the time had barely noticed. Humans were not important enough to investigate. The galaxy was full of species that rose and fell like waves on an ocean. One more disappearance meant nothing. But Talik was beginning to think it meant everything. He ran the energy scan from Earth again, this time using a more sensitive filter. The results made his stomach drop. The pulse was not just repeating, it was accelerating. Whatever was down there was not just dormant anymore, it was waking up. And his original scan, the one he had shown Draven, had been the trigger. He had knocked on a door, and something on the other side had hurt him. Talik knew he should report this to his superiors. Protocol demanded it, but he also knew what would happen if he did. Draven would either ignore it again, or worse, send a military team to Earth to strip mine whatever technology was generating the signal. The Valori way was simple. If something had value, you took it. If something was a threat, you destroyed it. There was no room for understanding, no interest in learning. And Talik had a feeling that whatever was on Earth was not something you could simply take or destroy. He made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He requisitioned a small scout ship under the excuse of a routine outer rim survey, loaded it with enough supplies for a solo trip, and set a course for the Sol system. The journey took 11 days through fold space. Talik spent most of that time reading the old human records he had collected. He learned about their wars, their art, their science, their strange and beautiful habit of telling stories about things that had never happened. He learned about their music, their cities, their capacity for both terrible cruelty and extraordinary kindness. The more he read, the more confused he became. These were not the actions of a species that simply gave up and died. When his ship dropped out of fold space at the edge of the Sol system, Talik felt a shiver run through his body. The system was quiet. 8 planets orbited a middle-aged yellow star. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. But something felt wrong. The silence here was not empty. It was heavy, like the silence of a room where someone is hiding and holding their breath. He guided his ship slowly toward the 3rd planet. Earth grew larger in his view screen, and he could not deny that it was beautiful. Blue oceans covered most of the surface. Green and brown continents stretched between them. White clouds drifted lazily across the sky. It looked alive. It looked like a planet that was being taken care of. But by whom? Talek entered orbit and began his scans. The surface readings confirmed what the old records said. Dense forests, large animal populations, ruined cities slowly being reclaimed by nature. No signs of intelligent life. But when he turned his scanners downward, deep below the surface, everything changed. 300 kilometers beneath the ground, hidden under layers of rock and ancient reinforced metal, there was a structure. It was enormous, stretching across an area the size of a small continent. And it was active. Energy flowed through it in patterns that Talek's instruments could not fully read. It was like trying to understand a language he had never heard before. He adjusted his scanners, trying to get a clearer picture. The structure had nodes, thousands of them, connected by a network of channels that pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm. It reminded Talek of a heartbeat. And at the center of the structure, buried deepest of all, were two life signs. Talek froze. He checked the readings 3 times. There was no mistake. 2 living beings were down there, suspended in some kind of stasis field. Their biological signatures were unmistakable. They were human. His hands were shaking. 500,000 years. 500,000 years these two had been sleeping beneath the surface of their world, while the galaxy moved on without them, while empires rose and fell, while the Valori conquered everything in sight. 2 humans had been waiting. Talek leaned back in his chair and stared at the readings on his screen. He thought about Draven. He thought about the Valori Empire. He thought about the hundreds of conquered worlds and the billions of enslaved lives. And then he thought about that single line of ancient text. We are waiting. They were not just sleeping, Talek realized. They were guarding something. The massive structure beneath the surface was not a ruin. It was not a tomb. It was a weapon, or a shield, or something so far beyond Valori technology that he could not even begin to understand it. And these 2 humans were its keepers. At that exact moment, deep beneath the surface of Earth, something changed. The stasis field around one of the pods flickered. A monitor that had been dark for millennia lit up with a soft blue glow. Data began scrolling across the screen. Readings of the ship in orbit above, its energy signature, its origin. A mechanical voice, old and calm, spoke into the silence of the underground chamber. External scan detected. Valori origin. Threat assessment, moderate. Initiating Phase 1 awakening protocol. The stasis fluid in the first pod began to drain. Slowly, carefully, as if the machines knew that what they held was precious and fragile and irreplaceable. Inside the pod, a man who had been asleep for 500,000 years took his first breath. His name was Hajun, and he was not happy to be woken up. The great hall of the Galactic Senate was filled with thousands of species from every corner of the known universe. Light from distant stars poured through the crystal dome above, casting long golden lines across the marble floor. Representatives from 100 conquered worlds sat in silence. They had no choice. The Valori Empire owned them now. At the center of the hall, standing on a raised platform made of black stone, was Commander Draven. He was tall even by Valori standards, with pale gray skin and sharp golden eyes that never blinked. His armor was decorated with the symbols of every world he had crushed under his boot. He wore them like medals. He wore them like trophies. Draven raised one hand, and the hall went completely silent. 500,000 years, he said, his voice deep and cold. That is how long the Valori have ruled this galaxy. 500,000 years since we rose from the ashes of war and claimed what was rightfully ours. And in all that time, not one species has stood against us and survived. The senators lowered their heads, some out of respect, most out of fear. Draven smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile a predator gives before it closes its jaws. "Today I bring you a new gift," he continued. "The Renari system has fallen. 7 planets, 12 billion lives, all now under Valori protection." He said the word protection the way someone would say ownership. A holographic map appeared behind him, showing the galaxy in blue light. Red marks covered almost every region. Each red mark was a conquered world. There were hundreds of them, thousands. The galaxy was drowning in red. But there was one small dot, far out on the edge of an unimportant spiral arm, that was neither red nor blue. It was gray, forgotten, unmarked. Earth. No one in the Senate remembered Earth. It had been removed from the galactic records over 400,000 years ago. The species that once lived there, humans, they were called, had disappeared without a trace. Some old records said they destroyed themselves. Others said they simply died out, like so many primitive species do. A few strange myths spoke of humans escaping into the dark spaces between stars, but no one believed those stories. Draven certainly did not believe them. He had visited Earth once early in his career, when he was still a low-ranking officer, looking for easy victories. He had taken a small fleet to the Sol system, expecting to find ruins, maybe some ancient technology worth stealing. What he found was a dead world. The oceans were still blue. The forests had grown wild and thick. Animals roamed freely across empty cities that had crumbled into dust and vine. But there were no humans, not a single one. He had ordered his soldiers to scan the planet from pole to pole. They found nothing. No life signs, no energy readings, no technology, just silence and wind and the slow sound of a world that had been left behind. Draven had marked Earth as Category 0 in his report. It meant the planet had no value, no resources worth taking, no species worth enslaving. It was, in every way that mattered to the Valori Empire, completely useless. That report had been filed and forgotten, just like Earth itself. Now, standing in the Senate Hall with the galaxy at his feet, Draven had no reason to think about that small gray dot. He had bigger things on his mind. The Renari conquest had been his greatest victory yet, and he intended to use it to push for a seat on the Valori High Council. Power was the only thing Draven truly loved, and he was very close to having more of it than anyone in the Empire. After his speech, he walked through the long corridors of the Senate building, flanked by his personal guards. Other officers saluted him as he passed. Politicians stepped aside and bowed their heads. Draven enjoyed every moment of it. He reached his private chamber and sat down at his command desk. A young officer named Talik was already waiting for him. Talik was different from most Valori soldiers. He was quiet, careful, and curious about things that did not involve war. Draven kept him around because he was useful with technology, but he did not respect him. "Commander," Talik said, standing straight, "I have the scan reports from the Outer Rim Patrol." "Anything worth my time?" Draven asked without looking up. "Mostly nothing, sir. Dead systems, asteroid fields. But there is one thing." Draven glanced at him. Talik pulled up a small holographic display. It showed a faint energy pulse coming from a planet in a distant system. The signal was weak, barely noticeable, buried under layers of natural radiation. Most scanners would have missed it entirely. "This is from the Sol system," Talik said, "from the 3rd planet." Draven stared at the display for a moment. Then he leaned back in his chair. "Earth," he said flatly. "That dead rock." "Yes, sir. But the energy pulse is not natural. It is structured, repeating. It looks like it could be artificial." Draven waved his hand dismissively. "I visited that planet myself. There is nothing there. Your scanners are picking up old geological activity, maybe some leftover radiation from their primitive nuclear age." With respect, sir, the pattern does not match geological activity. It matches a dormant power system, something very old and very large. Draven looked at Talek for a long moment. His golden eyes were cold and unreadable. "Drop it," he said. "I have a council seat to win. I am not going to waste time chasing ghosts on a dead world." Talek opened his mouth to argue, but stopped himself. He knew better than to push Draven when he had already made up his mind. He bowed his head and left the room. But he did not drop it. That night, alone in his quarters, Talek pulled up every old record he could find about Earth. Most of them were incomplete or corrupted by time. But buried deep in an archive that had not been opened in 300,000 years, he found something strange. It was a single line of text, written in an ancient human language that took his translator several minutes to decode. It read, "We are not gone. We are waiting." Talek stared at those words for a long time. A cold feeling crept up his spine. He looked out his window at the stars and wondered for the first time in his life if the Valori had made a terrible mistake. Somewhere far away, deep beneath the surface of a planet covered in green forests and blue oceans, something very old and very powerful received a signal. It was the echo of Talek's scan, bouncing through layers of rock and metal and ancient technology. A light turned on in the darkness, then another, then 1,000 more.